She didn't even lower her voice when she said it. That was the part I couldn't shake. Standing there on the sidewalk in front of the convention center with my good shoes on and a card in my purse I'd spent 40 minutes picking out. "You know how you can be, Helen," my daughter-in-law said, adjusting her clutch bag and not quite looking at me. "Marcus needs this day to go smoothly. Let's not make it about something else." I had driven 9 hours, left my house at 4 a.m. while it was still dark, and the neighbor's dog was the only thing awake on the street. I'd packed light, the way my late husband Raymond always said to pack. Just what you need, and nothing you'll regret carrying. I wore the blouse Jess had helped me pick at Thanksgiving. The navy one, with the small pearl buttons. She'd said it made me look like a woman who had things figured out. My son, Nathan, was standing slightly behind his wife, hands in the pockets of a suit I didn't recognize. He'd gotten his hair cut recently, styled back the way he never wore it when he was a boy. He looked at the people filing past us into the hall, graduates in gowns, parents with cameras, a grandmother somewhere near the entrance holding a balloon bouquet in school colors. He was watching all of them, and not watching me. "I'm not going to cause anything," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Diane tilted her head just slightly, the way she did when she wanted to appear patient. "I know you mean well, but you know how things get. And Marcus is with his fraternity right now and his friends, and it's just, she exhaled. It's just his day, just his day. I had paid for 38 months of that day. I had transferred money on the 15th of every month, starting when Marcus was a junior in high school, never late, never short, because that's what I had promised myself when Raymond died, that the kids would be fine, that I would make sure of it, that whatever else fell apart, education wouldn't be one of the things. Nathan finally looked at me. "Mom, we'll get dinner after. We saved you a seat at the restaurant." A seat at the restaurant, not inside at his graduation. At the restaurant. After, I nodded. The same way you nod when the doctor tells you something you already suspected but didn't want confirmed. The small nod that says, "I understand," even though understanding makes everything worse. I turned around. I did not cry walking back to the car. I drove to a gas station 2 blocks away and sat in the parking lot with the engine running for a while because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. There was a woman at the pump next to me wrestling with a stroller and a cup of coffee, doing 3 things at once, the way young mothers do, and I watched her and thought about nothing in particular. The hotel room was clean and impersonal, the way hotel rooms are when you chose them for the price and not the experience. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my good clothes, and looked at the window, at the city outside, going about its afternoon without knowing or caring what had happened on a sidewalk outside a convention center 30 minutes ago. My phone showed a text from Jess. "Did you make it there okay? How's Marcus? Excited?" I started typing 3 different responses, deleted all of them. Finally sent, "Made it. Talk later." The flowers I'd ordered for Marcus were still sitting at the hotel's front desk in a plastic sleeve, 8 yellow roses, and a card that said, "I'm so proud of the man you've become." I'd written it myself the night before in the parking lot of a McDonald's, somewhere around the state line, because I hadn't wanted to write it at home where I might second-guess the words. I went down and got them, brought them back upstairs, set them on the desk by the window, and looked at them for a while. Then I opened the small notebook I always carry in my bag and wrote one line. "What did you expect, Helen?" It wasn't self-pity. It was a real question. I had been asking myself a version of it for years. Every time Nathan made a comment about my house or my clothes or the way I talked to his friends at dinners I was technically invited to but never quite welcomed at, there was always something. The wine I chose. The story I told. The way I laughed too loud at something that apparently wasn't funny. I had spent the better part of a decade making myself smaller at their table, and it had not made me any more welcome. I fell asleep with the TV on, which I never do at home. In the morning, Jess called before I was fully awake. She didn't ask if I was okay. She said, "Tell me what happened." And the directness of it made my eyes sting in a way the day before hadn't. So I told her, the whole sidewalk, the whole Diane, the whole restaurant that was apparently a consolation prize for a grandmother who drove 9 hours. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm coming. You don't have to. I know I don't have to." She arrived 3 hours later with a bag from a diner down the street, and that particular energy she's always had, steady but not still. She put the food on the small table by the window and sat across from me like we were having an ordinary meal, not a crisis. She asked about my drive, about the audiobook I'd been listening to, a memoir by a woman who'd sailed solo around a portion of the Pacific after 60. She let me eat half my sandwich before she said anything about Nathan. He didn't say anything? He told me there was a seat at the restaurant. She shook her head slowly. He really thought that was okay. He's been letting Diane think for him for a while, I said. And then, because Jess never needed protecting from the truth, I said, I think he's been embarrassed by me for longer than I wanted to admit. That was the word that had been sitting at the back of my throat since the sidewalk. Embarrassed. Not angry at me. Not worried about me. Embarrassed. By the flower shop that was small and smelled like cut stems and old wood. By the neighborhood I'd refused to leave after Raymond passed. By the accent I'd kept from my childhood in eastern Kentucky, the one that rounded certain vowels in ways that apparently announced where you came from, to people who'd decided where you came from, was something to have left behind. I thought about the charity auction 2 years ago. Nathan's firm had a table. He'd introduced me to a colleague as my mother. She had a flower shop. Had, past tense, like I was already done. Jess stayed through the afternoon. We sat in the room and talked about real things, the kind of conversation that doesn't happen enough when everyone's busy being fine. At one point, she said, quietly, "I've been wondering for years when you were going to stop pretending." I looked at her. Pretending what? That it was okay. That he was going to change. That Diane was just difficult, and that it would smooth out. I didn't answer right away. Outside, a siren passed and then faded. "I think I kept waiting to be wrong," I said. She nodded. "You're not." When she left to get us coffee from the lobby, I sat alone and thought about the money. Not in a dramatic way, just practically, the way Raymond used to think about things, laid out on the table where you could see them clearly. The first transfer to Marcus's college account had been 4 years ago, $12,000, which covered first-year tuition at the state school he'd chosen. The year after, Nathan had called and said Marcus might want to transfer somewhere better, somewhere with a stronger architecture program, and could I help? I had said yes, because that's what I said. The school was $31,000 a year. I covered 2 of them. When Nathan had asked if I could co-sign a refinance on their house because rates were good and it would free up cash flow, I had signed. When Diane had mentioned the kitchen renovation and Nathan had called to ask if I might contribute, since it would raise the home's value and we're all family anyway, I had written the check. When Marcus needed a car his junior year and Nathan said it was just a loan, I had paid for it and never mentioned a repayment schedule because I knew there wouldn't be one. It was not a small number when you added it together. I opened my notebook again and wrote down what I remembered. The rough total sat at the bottom of the page in my handwriting. 5 digits. No cents, no interest, no late fees, because I had never charged those things. Jess came back with the coffee, and I showed her the page without saying anything. She looked at it for a long moment. "Does Marcus know?" she asked. "He knows I helped. I don't think he knows how much." "Does Nathan?" "He knows exactly how much." She set the coffee down and sat back. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the yellow roses on the desk, still in their sleeve, card still sealed. "I'm going to go home," I said. "And then I'm going to think." I drove back on a Thursday. The roads were quiet in the early hours, the sky still gray when I crossed the state line, And I listened to the rest of the sailing memoir, the part where the woman describes being alone on the water for 14 days and deciding that silence was not the same thing as emptiness. I thought about that for a while. Home looked the same as I'd left it. The porch light was on because I'd forgotten to turn it off, which meant it had been burning for 2 days straight, which made me think of my mother and how she used to leave lights on for people who might not come back. I turned it off and carried my bag inside. The house felt right in the quiet way it always does when I've been away. My plants needed water. The coffee maker needed to be rinsed. I did both things slowly, and then sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and let the morning come in through the windows. I had opened the flower shop in 1994 with Raymond and a small loan from his parents, who believed in us more than the bank did. We had run it together for 11 years before Raymond got sick, and then I had run it alone for 9 more. I sold it in 2014, not because I wanted to, but because my knees were going and the neighborhood was changing, and a young couple had made an offer that Raymond's practical voice in my head said was fair. I had cried exactly once about selling it, on the drive home from signing the papers, and not at all after that, because crying after the fact doesn't water anything. The money from the sale had become the thing I used carefully, not extravagantly. I had kept it in accounts that earned modest interest and moved portions of it when family needed things, because that's what Raymond would have done, and because I believed at the time that helping was the same as being part of something. I understood now that those are different things. I called my accountant first, a woman named Gloria, who had handled my taxes since 2003, and who had the rare quality of saying exactly what she thought without making you feel stupid for not having thought of it first. I need to see where things stand, I said. All of it. The trust, the cosigns, the college account. She sent everything to my email that afternoon. I printed it and sat at the kitchen table with a second cup of coffee and read through 40 pages of my own financial history. The college account still had $18,000 in it. Marcus's final semester was covered, but there was a remainder sitting there with his name on the beneficiary line. The house refinance I'd co-signed was still active. Monthly payment, $2,240. My name was still on it. I sat with that for a while. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney. A man named Frank Oswald, who had handled Raymond's estate and who sent a Christmas card every year without fail, always handwritten, always with a note that said something specific and not generic. "Frank," I said when he answered, "I need to make some changes." He came to the house 2 days later because I asked him to, and because he was the kind of attorney who still believed in house calls when the situation called for it. He sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and listened without interrupting while I told him what I wanted. I wanted the trust restructured. Marcus removed as beneficiary of the remainder. Jess added in his place, with a provision that any unused funds roll into a separate account I was establishing for something else. "The cosign on the refinance," Frank said, looking at his notes. "I want to begin the process to remove myself." He nodded slowly. "That will require Nathan's cooperation to refinance under just his name." "I know," I said. "I want to start the paperwork anyway. Let him figure out the rest." Frank wrote something. "The car loan under Marcus's name that you're guaranteeing?" "Same." He looked up. "Helen, are you sure about all of this?" I looked at the window. The yard outside had the first crocus of the season coming up near the fence post, small and purple and stubborn, the way crocuses are, pushing up before the ground has fully decided to cooperate. "I've been sure for a while," I said. "I just wasn't ready." He drafted the preliminary documents that afternoon at my table. I signed the authorization forms before he left. He shook my hand at the door and said, "Raymond would be proud of you." I didn't answer that, because some things are just for keeping. The calls from Nathan started on a Saturday. I was doing laundry when the first one came. I let it go. He called again 20 minutes later, and then a third time that evening. His voicemail was careful, the tone he uses when he's rehearsed something. Mom, hey, I just wanted to check in and see how your drive home was. Give me a call when you get a chance. I did not call back. Sunday, he called twice. The message, the second time, was slightly less practiced. Mom, I've been getting some emails from the bank about the account activity. I'm sure it's nothing. Just wanted to touch base. Monday morning, Diane called. She never calls. I watched her name on the screen until it stopped. Her voicemail was short. Helen, it's Diane. Nathan's been trying to reach you. We'd love to catch up. Just let us know you're okay. Just let us know you're okay. As if my silence were the emergency and not the sidewalk outside the convention center, not the restaurant seat that was supposed to make me feel included. The call I had been both waiting for and not waiting for came on a Wednesday evening. Marcus. His voice was younger on the phone than in person, which had always struck me. Hey, Grandma. Hi, sweetheart. A pause, the kind that means he has something to say and isn't sure how to start it. I heard you didn't come in to graduation, he said finally. I let the sentence sit between us for a moment. Your mother asked me not to, he exhaled. She told me something different. What did she tell you? That you'd called and said you weren't feeling well? That you'd turned around on the drive? I closed my eyes briefly. Not from surprise. I had known. Some quiet part of me had known that Diane would do the accounting differently when she reported to Marcus, that she would make my exit look like my choice. I drove 9 hours, Marcus. I was there at the door. A longer silence this time. I didn't know, he said. And I believed him, which made it both better and worse. I had watched Marcus grow up at a careful distance, the kind of distance that Nathan had gradually built between us over the years. Nothing dramatic, just a slow accumulation of missed calls, rescheduled holidays, occasions where my role had been reduced and then reduced again. Marcus knew me the way children know the grandparents who are not the main grandparents, the ones who get the polite hugs at Christmas and the thank you texts that are clearly sent in batches. Your mother stood on the sidewalk in front of the hall, I said, and told me you needed the day to go smoothly, and that she knew how I could be. I heard him breathe. What does that mean? He asked. I've been asking myself the same thing for 20 years, I said. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't plan for that to happen. I know you didn't plan it. I want to. He stopped, started again. Is there something I can do? It was a genuine question. I could hear that. It had the quality of someone who is just beginning to look at something they'd been looking past. The way your eyes adjust in a room you hadn't noticed was dim until someone opens a curtain. You don't need to do anything, I said. But I want you to know something. I waited a beat. I've been contributing to your college account since you were 17, every semester. I'm not telling you that so you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I think you deserve to know the real story. Silence. How much? He asked. I told him. He didn't speak for a while after that. When he did, his voice was different, a little heavier. I didn't know. Nobody told me. I know. Does that mean? He paused. Is the account? I've made some changes, I said simply. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He said, I understand. And the smallness of it made something ache in me that I hadn't expected. I forgive you, I said, for not knowing. But there are things now that are yours to figure out. He said, okay? I put the phone down on the table and sat in the quiet kitchen and thought about how strange it is to grieve someone who is still alive. Nathan called again Thursday morning. His voice on the voicemail was no longer rehearsed. Mom, the bank called about the cosign removal. They said you've initiated the process. I need you to call me. I don't understand what's happening. If something's wrong, if I did something. A breath. Just call me. Please. I didn't. The next one came that afternoon. The refinance situation, Mom, that's going to affect my credit if I have to redo the whole thing right now. The market isn't. Look, I know graduation was complicated and I'm sorry you drove all that way, but we can talk about this. We're family. I'm sorry you drove all that way. Not, I'm sorry we turned you away. Friday, he sent a text. 5 sentences. The last one said, I hope you know I've always appreciated everything you've done for us. I read it twice and put my phone face down on the counter. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and sat across a desk from a young woman named Patricia, who handled my accounts and who had a small framed photo of a golden retriever on her desk. I liked her immediately. I want to establish a separate account, I said. A private fund. Scholarship purposes. She walked me through the options: managed charitable trust, donor-advised fund, direct scholarship account. I chose the simplest structure: private, with full discretion on my part for selection, no connection to my family name. What's the target amount? She asked. I want to start with what's remaining in the college trust, I said. Approximately $15,000. I'll add to it. She typed it in. Any specific criteria for recipients? I had thought about this. I had thought about it since the hotel room, since the drive home, since the crocuses. First-generation college students, I said. Preference for people who have been working to pay their own way. Someone who is used to being told that their dreams are impractical. Patricia nodded, like she understood something personal in that. When I left the bank, the afternoon had gotten warm in the slow, uncertain way of early spring. Not committed to warmth, but suggesting it. I walked to my car and sat for a moment before starting the engine. I thought about the flower shop, about the years Raymond and I had spent building it from nothing, the way we'd learned to read the neighborhood, who needed sympathy arrangements on short notice, which families came in every year for prom corsages, which elderly customers had nobody to bring them flowers, so they bought them for themselves. We had kept records of everyone, not formally, just in a ledger Raymond kept. Names and dates and what they'd ordered, so that if they came back we could say, oh yes, the white lilies, that was for your mother. Nobody had kept a ledger of me. That was the thought that arrived like a stone dropped into still water. I had kept careful records of everyone else's needs for decades, and not one person in my family had written down a single thing I needed. Jess came over on a Sunday with seedlings from the nursery where she'd been volunteering, small pots of basil and tomato starts that she set on my kitchen windowsill. She didn't ask about Nathan or Marcus. She asked whether the compost I'd been keeping over winter was ready to use. We went out to the garden and worked for 2 hours, slow and quiet, her hands in the dirt the same way mine were, unhurried. She asked about the scholarship fund. I told her what I'd set up. She looked up from the row she was planting. You're going to pick the people yourself? I am. How? Essays. I said. Just the writing. No photos. No recommendations. No performance. I want to know how they think about their own life. She pressed a seedling into the earth and patted the soil around it. You'd be good at that. You always knew who was honest. The first application arrived 3 weeks later, forwarded through the bank with identifying information removed. I read it at my kitchen table in the evening. A young man from rural West Virginia, 23, had worked at a lumber yard since he was 16, took online classes when he could, wanted to study environmental science because of what he'd seen happen to the creeks near where he grew up. He didn't write like someone performing. He wrote like someone thinking out loud. At one point he said, I am not asking for charity. I am asking for a chance to be more useful than I've been able to be so far. I sat with that sentence for a long time. The second one was from a woman in her 30s who had started college twice and left both times, once for a family emergency, once for money. She had 4 children. She wanted to finish a nursing degree. I thought about Raymond, about the nurses who had been steady and kind at the end, who had known exactly how to be present without overwhelming. I approved both applications. Writing the anonymous notes was something I had not expected to matter as much as it did. Just a card each, plain white, nothing printed on the front. I wrote to the young man from West Virginia that I believed the land kept records of how it was treated, just like people did, and that he seemed like someone who understood that. I wrote to the woman finishing her nursing degree that arriving somewhere late was not the same as arriving wrong, and that the patients who needed her were already waiting. I didn't sign either of them. Just a line at the bottom. From someone who roots for you. In the middle of April, Nathan came to the house. I was in the backyard when I heard the knock. He had called twice the week before and left messages that had shifted again, less entitled now, more uncertain. I had listened to both and not responded. He stood at the back gate, and for a moment I just looked at him. He was my son. He had his father's forehead, his father's hands. When he was 8, he'd had a phase where he refused to wear socks because he said they felt wrong. And I had driven him to school every day that winter in the wrong shoes for the cold, because I did not want him to learn that his feelings were inconvenient. "Mom," he said. "Nathan." He looked at the garden, at the seedlings Jess and I had planted. "It looks good back here." "It's early yet," I said. He came in through the gate and stood at the edge of the garden bed without knowing what to do with his arms. "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I should have?" He stopped. "Diane handles a lot of things, and sometimes I let her do that when I shouldn't." "What happened at graduation?" "That was wrong. I want you to know I know that." I looked at him directly. "Do you know why it was wrong?" He met my eyes and then looked away slightly. "Because you came all that way. Because I've been part of this family for 67 years and I was made to feel like a problem to be managed." He didn't answer right away. A bird crossed the fence and landed briefly near the tomato starts and then left. "I don't know how to fix it," he said finally. And at least that was honest. "You probably can't fix it," I said. "But you can do something about the kind of husband you are going forward and the kind of father, and whether your son grows up understanding that the people who helped build his life are worth acknowledging." He nodded. "The financial changes I've made are done," I said. "I'm not revisiting them." His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't argue. He knew, I think, that arguing would confirm everything. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I'm doing this because I have things I'd like to do with my time and my resources, and none of those things involve continuing to make myself invisible in my own family." We stood in the garden for another few minutes without saying much. When he left, he hugged me briefly at the gate, the careful kind of hug that holds something back. I let it be what it was. After the gate closed, I sat on the porch step and looked at the yard. Thought about Raymond, how he would have handled this. How he had always said that the worst thing you can do to someone who loves you is make them feel invisible. He had not been a complicated man. He had just paid attention. The letter from Marcus arrived on a Wednesday. Handwritten. 2 pages on notebook paper, the kind with 3 holes punched down the side. He wrote that he had been talking to Jess, that she had told him things he hadn't known, about the flower shop, about the years I had run it alone, about the transfers that had been made quietly into accounts with his name on them. He wrote that he had asked his mother about it and that the conversation had not gone well, but that he had learned enough to understand that the story he'd been told about where things came from was incomplete. He did not ask me to restore the trust. He did not apologize in the practiced way his father had. He wrote, "I want to be the kind of person you don't have to protect yourself from. I'm not sure I know how yet, but I want to learn." He ended it. "If you have room for me in your life still, I'll earn it." I read it twice. I set it on the table beside my chair. I did not respond that day. Instead, I went to the desk in the corner of the living room, the one that had been Raymond's, and opened the file drawer. Near the back was a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a photograph from 1982. Raymond and I outside the first location we'd rented before we found the shop. A too small space between a dry cleaner and a hardware store. Both of us squinting in the sun. Both of us holding coffee cups. Both of us looking like we had no idea what we were doing and absolutely intended to do it anyway. I held the photo for a while. There are things you build in your life that don't get counted in the financial record. The getting up before dawn. The staying after everyone else has gone home. The deciding not to leave when leaving would have been easier. Raymond had known what I was made of. I had known what he was made of. We had kept track of each other. I put the photo back. Then I pulled out a note card and wrote to Marcus. Not long. Just a few lines. I wrote, "I have always had room for you. What I'm asking is that you make room for the real version of me, not the one that's convenient to the story. Come for dinner sometime. I'll make the lemon cake your grandfather always asked for. Just let me know when." I sealed it and put a stamp on it and set it by the door to mail in the morning. That evening, I went for a walk around the block, the long way, past the nursery where Jess volunteered and the library branch that had been there longer than I'd lived in this neighborhood. The air smelled like someone nearby was grilling, and the sky was doing that thing it does in April where it holds the light longer than you expected, as if the day isn't ready to let go yet. At the corner, near the elementary school, I stopped. The school had a small mural on the side wall, painted by the fifth graders years ago, something about community and growing. It had faded and been repainted several times, but the original concept was still there underneath all the additions, children's handprints in a chain around the outside. I had walked past it 100 times without stopping to look. I stopped now. Some of those handprints were from children who were adults now, people in their 30s with children of their own, people who had grown up in this neighborhood and stayed, or grown up and left. Their hands had been pressed into paint one afternoon after school, and now they were part of a wall. Nobody had asked them to be. They had just left a mark. I thought about the scholarship recipients, the young man from West Virginia and the woman finishing her nursing degree. I didn't know their faces. I didn't know their voices, but they knew something about me, something true, more true in some ways than what my own son knew, because I had written to them honestly without needing them to think well of me. I walked home slowly. I sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and thought about what I wanted the next few years to look like, not in the way of plans, but in the way of values. What did I want to spend my time doing? What did I want to stop spending my time doing? Who did I want to be visible to? Jess? Certainly. Reed Kavanaugh, my oldest friend from the neighborhood, who still lived 6 blocks away, and who had been checking in on me with quiet consistency since Raymond died. The recipients of the fund, in whatever anonymous way that connection could exist. The plants in the garden that didn't need anything from me except water and attention. I wrote at the top of the page, "What you tend grows." Then I wrote a list, nothing dramatic, just small, true things. Call Jess on Sundays. Read the applications carefully. Let the garden surprise me. Answer Nathan when I'm ready, not when he needs something. Write Marcus back. Don't pretend anything is fine that isn't. I folded the page and put it in the drawer by my bed. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into its evening sounds. Someone a few houses down was practicing something on a guitar, the same few bars over and over with a pause between each attempt. The sound of someone learning rather than performing. I found it unexpectedly comforting. I made myself a small dinner. I washed the dishes. I turned off the kitchen light and went to sit by the window in the living room where the last of the daylight came in at the angle that made the room look warmer than it was. I had not expected to feel peaceful. I had expected, if I was honest, to feel mostly alone. But the aloneness I felt tonight was not the hollow kind. It was the kind that comes when you've stopped filling space with noise that wasn't serving you, the kind that means something can grow here now. I thought about the woman in the memoir, alone on the water for 14 days, who had said that silence was not emptiness. I understood it better now. I'm not telling you this story because everything resolved neatly, because it didn't. Nathan and I are in an early place, tentative, like ground that's been disturbed and is deciding what to do next. Marcus came for dinner 3 weeks later, alone, without Diane and Nathan, and we sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours, and he asked me real questions and I gave him real answers. And it wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. And that's better than comfortable most of the time. The scholarship fund grew. A friend of Gloria's heard about it through channels I wasn't aware of and made a contribution. And then another. I remained anonymous. I read every application myself. I am not always sure I choose correctly, but I choose carefully. And if you've sat here through all of this because something in it recognized you, because you know what it is to keep giving past the point where the giving is returned, because you've eaten the consolation dinner and worn the smile and wondered when you stopped being someone people made room for, I want you to know something. You don't have to wait for them to see you. You can just start being seen. Leave a comment if you've ever had to choose yourself. I read every single one.